What's up guys, Vital Syntax here. I wanted to give you guys a real world test between 60 Hertz and 120 Hertz for people that are maybe interested in buying a 120 Hertz monitor. Now there's no real way to show you the difference in a video like this because first of all, YouTube only plays at 30 frames per second, and second of all, if you're not using a 120 Hertz panel, you wouldn't be able to see the difference anyway unless you had the two monitors side by side. So what I've done in this video, I've played some Battlefield 3 on canals in TDM with a sniper rifle, which I think is one of the more difficult things to do in Battlefield 3. It requires a bit more accuracy than using something like an M16. And I'm playing at 120 Hertz, and then I switched my monitor's mode to 60 Hertz. And you can do that via the NVIDIA control panel. You can do that in a lot of the games. Battlefield 3 has a Hertz setting, or you could use a frame rate limiter like DX Story and set your max frame rate to 60, which is actually what I did. So essentially you're seeing the difference between me playing at 120 Hertz and me playing at 60 Hertz, and there's quite a big difference. And first of all, before I show you guys the test results, I want to talk about the basic differences and advantages of having a 120 Hertz monitor. The biggest one for me is smoothness. Once you get used to, say for example, 60 frames per second, maybe if you came from a console playing Battlefield 3 and now you're playing on the PC, you'll know that the difference is fairly large. It looks way smoother, it looks way better, especially in a first-person shooter or an action game like this. Obviously watching movies and stuff, you don't really need a really high frame rate. It actually kind of looks weird when you see a high frame rate movie, like for example when I saw The Hobbit in 48 frames per second. It just looked kind of weird, just because your eyes are kind of trained to look at 24 frames per second in the cinematic movie. But for video games and sports and motion and intensive moving images, higher frame rate always looks better. And I think having a higher frame rate and having that fluidity and smoother motion also allows me to track targets a little bit easier. Say, for example, when I'm sniping Battlefield 3, it allows me to, I think, be a little bit more accurate, actually be quite a bit more accurate than if I was playing at 60 Hertz / frames per second. And then on top of having fluid motion, maybe allowing to track your targets a little bit faster, you're typically going to have a lot less input lag. If you're seeing, in actually two different ways, because the first way is if you're seeing twice as many images every second, then you're just going to be able to respond twice as fast to whatever you're seeing twice as fast. And on top of that, most 120 Hertz monitors are TN panels, and they're designed to have the least input lag as possible. I mean, they're designed for first-person shooter gaming, like Battlefield 3 or Counter-Strike. And what they do is they'll have very little image processing. They'll try and remove any type of input lag that they can, because you can get a really good looking panel like an IPS panel that has amazing color reproduction, that has way more color depth, a bigger color gamut. It's calibrated to real world life colors, but there's going to be quite a bit more input lag, maybe twice, 3, 4 times, 5 times as much, especially if you're playing on a massive TV. A lot of those 55-inch 1080p TVs have quite a bit of input lag in comparison to a gaming monitor, especially one that's designed to have the least amount of input lag as possible. Now, when I talk about input lag, there's so many things that come into play, especially when you're talking about a video game, because you have like your mouse's input lag, your keyboard's input lag, your GPU might have input lag. The game itself might add input lag if you have something like VSync on, where you have an image buffer, and then also your monitor's input lag, your monitor's image processing lag. There's so many things. The pixels in your monitors, how long does it take the pixels to change color? Typically that's measured in like gray to gray, and it's usually like 2 milliseconds to 5 milliseconds. So there's so many different factors, and I think limiting those factors as much as possible is obviously going to give you a little bit more fluidity, allow you to be a little more responsive. And in first-person shooters, that's incredibly important, where twitch reflexes are really key to winning or playing well and whatnot. So anyway, the biggest disadvantage of using a 120 Hertz panel is, first of all, you're limited to TN panels. There's no there are a few IPS, Yamakaze Cat Leap, for example, but in the mainstream market, there's no IPS panels. That means that you're not going to have very good color reproduction. You're going to have very good viewing angles. The colors kind of look washed out if you're looking at it from a certain angle, not straight on or not level. So that's a disadvantage. And the other disadvantage is they're fairly expensive in comparison to other cheaper TN panels. I mean, you can get an Asus 60 Hertz monitor, I have one, for like $120, whereas the BenQ XL2420T cost me about $450 when I bought it. Now, monitors can be very expensive. There's IPS panels that are still 1080p that go upwards of $700, $800, $900, even $1,000. So, but just to put it into perspective, I mean, both being TN panels, a 120 hertz panel is going to be quite a bit more expensive than a 60 hertz panel that you can get for, you know, around $100, maybe $150. So as far as the results of this test, when I was playing at 120 hertz, I ended up with a score, and I don't know exactly what it is because I actually didn't record the end of the match. I'm not going to go in, I'm not going to count all my deaths and kills, but I ended up with a score of around 40 and 10. So about a 4 kill death ratio with 40 kills. Whereas I switched to, and this was directly after, right after I finished playing at 120 hertz, I switched to 60 hertz and played some more. I ended up with a score of about 20 and 24. So as you can see, I actually went from having a 4 kill death ratio to having a negative kill death ratio, and only having, you know, 20 kills. I think it was either 20 and, yeah, I think it was around 20 and 25 deaths or something like that. So it's a huge difference. Now, this isn't a perfect test because I think if my eyes were, you know, if I was playing at 60 hertz for a longer period of time and my eyes got more used to that slightly choppier motion, I think I probably would have gotten more used to it, and I would have kind of compensated and maybe played a little bit differently. And I also think when the second round of team deathmatch that I played on canals, it seemed like almost the entire team was using was you know, being M16 Pro bunny hop pros. So I don't know if that probably changed the score quite a bit, but regardless, this isn't a perfect test, but I think it's fairly obvious that, at least for me, and I think I say at least for me just so that people don't you know, get frustrated, but I think for everybody, if you played at 120 frames per second versus 60 frames per second, you'd become a better player. And now, is that necessarily worth spending $300 extra on a monitor? That's up to you. That's up to your financial situation, how much money you're willing to spend on gaming. But I just wanted to throw it out there that I think for the majority of players, if you can, you know, spend $400 or $450 on a high refresh rate panel, you're probably going to end up being a better player. Not overnight. It's not like you plug it in and now you're perfectly accurate, but I think it's just a general rule of thumb, you'll end up being a better player, especially once you get used to it. So anyway, thanks for watching the video, and I definitely want to hear you guys' feedback in the comments down below of what your guys' experiences with these panels are. I know there's probably a lot of people that are going to say that eyes can't see more than 30 frames or eyes can't see more than 60 frames, and my response to that is your eyeballs do not have a shutter, and therefore you are not a computer. You do not see in any form of a frame rate. A frame rate is just a way that a computer monitor can display images. It has nothing to do with the human eye or any other type of biological system. So that's just complete bullshit. But anyway, thanks for watching the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.